Welcome to the Israel Daily News. Gil Hoffman, Executive Editor and Executive Director at HonestReporting. Thank you for joining us to talk today about some global events that are affecting Israel.
Pleasure being with you, Shannon.
So let's get started by discussing major news that even my Israeli doctor asked me today about in a random doctor appointment. The New York City mayor, Mamdani, who has gotten into office. Have you been studying this? Have you been watching this at HonestReporting?
Absolutely. Because normally in Honest Reporting, we stay away from internal political battles. We're a 501c3 charity in the United States. I myself covered politics for the Jerusalem Post for 24 years, yet nobody knows who I vote for. This election's different because this election was something that unified Israelis, which is very hard to do. And all of Israelis are now worried for the people of New York, which is interesting because the people of New York have been worried about us for so long, especially over the last couple of years, and now it's going right back at them.
When I was in New York during Simchat Torah, I was hearing in the streets, I was out, I expected that the conversation was going to be about all of the hostages coming home. And there was conversation about that, especially from rabbis and community leaders that were giving sermons at synagogues. But what I really heard people buzzing about in the streets was who was going to win this New York City mayoral election. What has been the critiques from the Jewish Voice about Mamdani, and what is at stake for New York City with his win? I know a lot of people are concerned. Can you speak about what those concerns could possibly be?
Mamdani is in favor of the boycott, divestment, sanction movement of Israel very proudly. He even said it a couple days before the election. And when someone has a job like that, they can actually implement it. They can close down the Technion campus that there is in New York, which benefited Israel and New York tremendously. He can actually pull out pension funds of the state of New York, Israel bonds, among others. There's a teachers union that has pension funds as well. There's a lot of damage that he could do if he wants to. And if his funding came from various CARE and Linda Sarsour, people with that agenda, they're going to demand that he doesn't just talk the talk, but walk the walk.
There's something that I wanted you to share more about, which was when I've heard you discuss that already, I think within a day, Mamdani was responding to October 7th and not with support, care, or compassion for Israel, but on October 7th, or maybe it was a couple days later, that he was already firing back against Israel online. And this was at a point where Israel hadn't even responded yet to being brutally attacked. Can you talk about that?
Yes. A couple days after the war began, when Israel was still fighting to get the terrorists out of Israel who had invaded on October 7th, he already was accusing Israel of genocide on Twitter. And that just shows that facts don't matter. Maybe later on, the death toll was higher in Gaza than it was back then. And yet he just wanted to malign Israel's name. And that's something that started and it only got worse. There have been all kinds of terrible quotes since then, which you can see at honestreporting.com.
You've said that, actually not you've said, there have been a lot of individuals that have been coming to me to talk to me about the merits of Mamdani, what he's going to do positive for New York City, and the change that, we need to bring someone in to make changes because it's so difficult. What do you say to the average New Yorker who believes that Mamdani is going to improve the city through his policies?
Look, he's got a lot of ideas out there that haven't really succeeded elsewhere. And it's clouded by his anti-Semitism. It's made the President of the United States say he's not going to give funding. And you need to have funding from the federal government or you're in trouble. And he really did go too far, and that inevitably will hurt the people of New York. And I think that's something that maybe they should have taken into account when they voted. If I'm a New Yorker, I'm worried about the future economically, regardless of Israel and anti-Semitism.
Mamdani also has publicly stated that it shouldn't be about his views on Israel. He's the mayor of New York City. Why is he being questioned over and over again about Israel? And I have colleagues and friends who also say, why are you constantly bringing in Israel into the mix? We're talking about the mayor of New York City. We're talking about the buses. We're talking about landlords that aren't doing the right work. We're talking about people that can't afford to live in New York anymore and are getting pushed out. Is it important that Mamdani is speaking on Israel? And why does this matter for a New York City mayor?
Because it's the second largest Jewish city in the world and the largest outside of Israel. He needs to be the head of his people, his constituents. And if he has this obsession with harming his own citizens, he can't serve them. It doesn't matter what the group is. And unfortunately, Jews, as the most discriminated against minority in the United States, and obviously the most discriminated against minority in history, it's become socially acceptable, and his election proves it. And that endangers Jews not only in New York, but throughout America and throughout the world. If it's okay to do and say things about Jews that you wouldn't against any other minority or ethnic group.
Another question I have is, and I'm giving you all these questions because I genuinely am in touch with friends and family from Queens. I was just there. I grew up, I was born and raised in Queens, and I'm giving you honest feedback from people that live in New York City that are not Jews. And I think sometimes when you're in the Jewish community, you can, of course, think that you're right, and you can't see what other people are seeing because many people around you have the same viewpoint. So that's why I'm bringing you all of these questions. A question that I have is it possible to be so outspoken about Israel? And I want you to comment also on Mamdani saying that he would have Prime Minister Netanyahu arrested in New York, which is the location of where the UN General Assembly happens, and Netanyahu routinely speaks at the UN General Assembly. So that is something that really could come up. My question is it possible to not be anti-Semitic? Because he states over and over again, I care about New York City's Jewish population, and I'm going to fight for their Jewish population. But at the same time, I have X, Y, and Z to say about Israel, and I'm going to arrest the Prime Minister of Israel if he sets foot in New York. Are those two things possible to exist together?
He doesn't recognize the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. He says he'd recognize its right to exist at all. Okay, well, that's like recognizing Japan, but not the Japanese language and Japanese people, and say that you can have a country. And that's singling out the one Jewish state in the world when there are 22 Arab states and 57 Muslim states. And that's part of the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. So yes, he is an anti-Semite, and he will now have the power as an anti-Semite to implement policies, and that includes his threat. He can have the prime minister arrested. The federal police would then get involved, and you'd have New York City police fighting federal police, and he's just funded. He wants to defund the police anyway. So how much are they going to listen to? It's going to get really complicated if that happens. And of course, there are much more controversial leaders that have come to New York for this General Assembly many, many times. And part of America hosting it is that they don't arrest them. I certainly would love to see the leaders of Iran arrested, and they've certainly been responsible for a lot of loss of life in the United States, and Netanyahu isn't, regardless of what people think about him. But I'm also a political analyst, Shanna, and whether Netanyahu will still be prime minister next September, I don't know.
Well, you should say that to the people that are screaming and hollering "Rak Bibi," only Bibi, out of their cars. And but that's interesting. I'm glad that you're opining about the future or looking into the future, because I actually do have a future question that is up for you next, which is, we just recently saw an anti-Semitic attack against an Israeli man walking in the streets of New York with a kippah on his head, who was physically assaulted. Do you expect under Mamdani's rule, Mamdani's rule, I call it, Mamdani's mayoral tenure, for there to be more anti-Semitic attacks?
Unfortunately, I do fear that because he's made it socially acceptable. He's made the Jews the other. And he shouldn't do that. As a Muslim, he should understand what it means to be another. As someone who spoke Arabic in his victory speech, I was disappointed that he didn't choose to use that opportunity to send out an olive branch to the Jewish people who did not support him and really start making an effort to reach out in a way that he didn't. Just like I was disappointed that Ben-Gvir and his, just to pick another extremist, he didn't reach out when he had his speech after the election. He spoke about winning and taking revenge, and extremists are very hard to repent.
I want to move into a few broader Israel issues that I find very fascinating that you speak about regarding Israel in the media, as that's your expertise. You talked about the clash between the three narratives. Can you break down those three narratives for our listeners?
Absolutely. So Israel needs to be talking to three different audiences around the world. And sometimes our messaging contradicts each other. So we're talking to Israelis internally, especially at wartime. We need to calm the population. We need to make them think that we're winning, to make the people happy. And of course, a lot of generals want to be politicians one day. We're talking to our enemies. We want to deter our enemies. We want them to think that we're strong and that they should stop fighting us. And we're also talking to the world. And talking to the world is actually what wins a war. You know that, and I know that, but sometimes the army doesn't know that. Temporarily, Daniel Hagari was the spokesman of the army. He did know that. And he changed some policies because of that. And during his time, we got out a lot of messaging to the world that we hadn't done before that I think helped Israel tremendously. But because there are those clashes between the three, sometimes one or another miss out. And for much of Israel's history, it's been the speaking to the world that has missed out, and people need to understand those who are frustrated back home. Why doesn't Israel do a better job of PR? They need to understand that part of the reason is because it's hard to win all the people all the time, to win your own people, to deter your enemies, and to try to get out its message to the world.
You spoke about the issue of Israel's defense forces not releasing the numbers. And I think it's so important because the big issue that I'm seeing in the comments that I get on Instagram, in the private messages that I get, is how do you respond to the 60,000? How do you respond to, or even just a week ago, there were reports out that there were 100 people in Gaza that were killed by an Israeli airstrike that was in retaliation to some issue of the ceasefire that was not being upheld. And then in other reports, Israel doesn't say anything. The Israeli media doesn't have any numbers to combat it with. They can only say the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says X. And even that is difficult for a lot of Israeli journalists to even publish. However, the question I get as a journalist so often is, well, if that's the only number we have, then why can't we use that number?
Absolutely.
So can you talk about the issue of the numbers? And also, I think what's important about you sharing that is it's not a pro-Israel message to say, where are the numbers? A lot of people would be afraid to talk about that because maybe you look like you're not in support of Israel. But I think it's important sometimes to go down those roads where the door is closed and the lights aren't on, and flip them on so that people can get on board or people can see the nuance in what we're discussing. So I'm glad that you talk about that.
Absolutely. So first of all, it has to be said that every single death in this war on the Israeli side and on the other side has been a tragedy. And every single death in this war is the fault of Hamas. On October 6th, we were moving forward toward normalizing relations with the entire Arab and Muslim world, not aligned with Iran. It was going to happen. President Biden was very big on it happening. And that is one of the reasons why Sinwar started the war, because he wanted to prevent that from happening. And it didn't have to happen. We were going to double the amount of workers coming in from Gaza. We were going to improve their lives. All those who think we wanted to do a genocide, we actually wanted to do the exact opposite. We wanted to help the Gazan people tremendously. And I'm not among the people, even though the ordinary Gazans who are not Hamas did kill and rape and kidnap, I'm not among the people who are going to say, oh, hold them all accountable, they're all guilty. No, we wanted to minimize civilian deaths while the other side wanted to maximize civilian deaths. And I think it's reflected in the numbers that we've been seeing on the combat ratio of combatants to civilians. We've seen numbers put out by people like John Spencer, like Richard Kemp, who are not Jewish, who are top military people. And we've seen the minimization of the Palestinian numbers, which have, Hamas itself is admitted eventually that the numbers initially put out about the women and the children were wrong. Sal Eisenberg, who's a board member of Honest Reporting, has done incredible analysis, correcting the world media when they've reported incorrect things. But it really has to be the Israeli army in the end. They have numbers. They have intelligence. People are counting dead people in a way that Hamas even can't, because I'll tell you a secret. There is a Palestinian Authority health ministry that does exist. The Palestinian Authority was overthrown by Hamas, and they still offered themselves to come and do what a health ministry does, including counting dead people. And Hamas turned it down and instead put out numbers by an algorithm. So the Israeli army could counter that. They could be putting out numbers that show that the combatant to civilian ratio is something very favorable for Israel, perhaps even unprecedented. One of the reasons why they don't is because admitting any killing when you've got a trial going on in The Hague could cause problems.
For Hamas?
No, could cause problems for Israel. It's being put on trial in the International Criminal Court.
I thought you were trying to say that it would detract from Hamas's efforts if they admitted that their numbers were wrong.
Oh, no. Hamas is very proud of trying to kill as many people as they can. Sinwar said at a certain point during the war, he was asked about the amount of the Gazans who had been killed, and he said, inshallah, it should be 10 times as much. That's Hamas for you. They want to maximize deaths on both sides, and Israel wants to minimize deaths on both sides, and yet we are being maligned around the world.
And you believe that part of the holdback on releasing these numbers is because of this case that's playing out in The Hague against Israel?
I don't know that for a fact, but it certainly goes through their heads of being careful. Unfortunately, there's a legal battlefield as well.
How is it possible that Hamas has these numbers when, for example, the Shifa hospital incident, in which immediately the press all over the world released a story that 500 people were killed in that incident, in which the reports came out that Israel had fired off a rocket at a hospital in Gaza, killing 500 people, and that those reports came out immediately, and they were published by credible sources like the New York Times, who probably should have known better that nobody could know a final body count within 2 to 3 minutes. So can you speak to that? And you had a very good comparison.
I'm going to try to remember the good comparison. So on October 17th, the world media bought hook, line, and sinker, Hamas telling them that Israel had bombed a hospital purposely in Gaza, killing exactly 500 people. They immediately started saying that a huge percentage were women and then a huge percentage were children, and the Hamas math didn't even add up. Even though at the same time, around then, there was a building in Florida that came down called Surfside, and there it took a month to find out how many people had been killed. So unfortunately, the world did not question the information that they got from Hamas. They wanted to do both sides. If Israel gave them numbers, the other side gives them numbers. And it's not the same what you get from a democracy with a functioning government and what you get from a terrorist organization. And I think too many media, with their both sidism, missed out on that. And they misled their readers and their viewers around the world. And to the credit of the IDF, that night, the commander of the Air Force and the chief of staff did not sleep until they were able to give credible proof, first to CNN and then to the rest of the world, that there was a rocket fired from a cemetery.
How did they give the proof?
They literally drove down the Iron Dome radar to the CNN bureau in order to show it to them because it was too big to email.
Wow, the file was too big?
Yes. So at least they made the effort. In the past, the Army didn't care to make such an effort, or they would make the effort after nobody was watching anymore. You know, we had wars that lasted 6 days. There was a tower that came down in Gaza. They didn't bother telling the world why. It just looked terrible. The AP had an office there, and they gave an hour for everybody to leave. It's May 2021. That hour, they filmed it from every possible angle. Israel looked terrible. Only after the war ended did they say, oh, by the way, it was a Hamas cyber tower that was jamming Iron Dome and taking it down saved lives. If you say it when nobody's watching anymore, it doesn't really count anymore.
The crazy thing about this story is that I remember it so clearly that I almost thought that it happened in this war. And there may have been a similar situation with the AP that came up, but it's just a repeated experience that something happens. The world is waiting for Israel to explain itself. Doesn't always come to an explanation. How important is it? And this is your work and this is your job, so I understand that for you it's very important. How important is it to combat the media bias? How important is it to see something that's wrong in the media and for your organization to go after it and correct the narrative? And if you'd like to share with us some of your successes that you've had in your 3 years at Honest Reporting, I think that would be able to give listeners an insight into what not only what your organization is doing to combat the narratives, but the narratives that exist that people don't even realize exist are so anti-Israel.
Absolutely. So this contrast cannot be more stark, because either the narrative will be that Israel became an international pariah like apartheid South Africa in this war, or Israel saved the world from genocidal terror organizations and an Islamic fundamentalist nuclear weapon. And if people continue to falsely believe the former, the world will continue to get more and more dangerous. Terror will be emboldened around the world, even in places where there are no Jews. I spoke many years ago at Utah Valley University, where Charlie Kirk was murdered. There aren't too many Jews over there on that campus, and that will continue to get worse. But if the world believes the truth about Israel, then our economy here will rebound. We'll have the post-war economic boom, also post-pandemic, which we'd have not much time between the pandemic and the war over here. And things will get safer in Jewish communities around the world, other than in New York. Also, terror will be weakened. A lot depends on that perception of Israel in that narrative war. And that's why we have been a lot more aggressive over the last 3 years at Honest Reporting, which was founded 25 years ago, but was really founded for October 7th. And since then, we've gotten 15 Hitler and Hamas praising anti-Semitic journalists suspended, reassigned, or fired, including 3 from the New York Times, 3 from AP, and 3 from CNN. And
you've gotten these individuals fired from their roles.
Absolutely. And we've gotten Christiane Amanpour to apologize 3 times over the last 5 years. And so these are big accomplishments at Honest Reporting that we're very proud of.
They are big accomplishments because these are individuals with mass audiences that people rely on and people trust. And when you have the information just going unchecked at these outlets, it is just so dangerous. So your takeaway is that it's worth it to combat the lies, that it's worth it to, even if you're an individual, to write a response comment on something that you see online, even if you're going to get pummeled with the negative anti-Israel hate. You think it's worth it?
I know it's not easy, but think about it. It saves lives. I'll give you just a couple examples. In the spring of 2023, 6 months before October 7th, there were incorrect reports about Israeli police purposely targeting worshippers in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And that led to terrorism. It led to the D family being murdered. And also an Italian tourist who was murdered here in Tel Aviv for the crime of looking Jewish. He wasn't. Also, October 7th, remember that they called it the Al-Aqsa flood because Jews had visited the Temple Mount during Sukkot, as if that would be an excuse to go and infiltrate Israel and try to murder and rape and kidnap as many people as you can. So,
well, that narrative is as old as time. I mean, we've seen that narrative. The Jews are taking over Al-Aqsa play out in 1929 in the Hebron massacre. That's a blood libel that is repeated and incites people to violence.
So even though it's been around forever, we still have to counter it. And you yourself have been very courageous on social media, even when it's unpopular, even if it makes you lose friends, even if it makes you be called names. And I know that a lot of listeners, people who watch your podcast have done the same. And I've got to tell you, you guys are heroes. You've stuck your neck out for Israel and the Jewish people, and you can be very proud of what you've done. You could have easily just led more comfortable lives and stayed out of the fray, but you joined, and you never know when you're going to make an impact on someone not Jewish, a friend of a friend of a friend who will learn from you. And I call that the Esther moment. Where you're in the right place at the right time, having the right influence on the right person in changing the world.
Before I let you go, you're here, you're on the record. Do you have any predictions that you would like to make for the year ahead? We just came out of the Chagim, out of the high holidays. We have the whole year ahead of us. We have a ceasefire that is holding up. Do you have any predictions?
Look, I have some hope that things are going to get better for Israel and the Jewish people. I think that next summer, everyone's going to want to come who didn't come here because of the pandemic and then the war. People have been dying to come here since 2019. And tour guides here who've been unemployed for so long are finally going to be able to share their incredible knowledge with the people coming from around the world. The high tech in the economy is going to blossom. And we are going to, little by little, work on our image again and make people realize that we're not what they thought we were. The Abraham Accords are going to be expanding, normalizing relations with countries like Saudi Arabia and Indonesia, who were ready before the war and now are going to be ready again because of what Israel offers strategically and economically. So maybe there's going to have to be some media reporting about some positive things going on here. But then again, I'm the eternal optimist, and I'm a Cubs fan, and next year's our year.
Is there room for optimism after Gaza has been destroyed? And is there an optimistic view that we can have, that we can think that there's going to perhaps be peace in the future between Palestinians and Jews? Or is that chance totally ruined? I mean, the surveys, at least throughout the Israeli society, most people don't think that peace is going to be able to be achieved between Palestinians and Israel because of October 7th. I would assume that Palestinians in Gaza don't believe that they will ever be able to, quote unquote, forgive Israel for flattening so much of the Strip. Is there a possibility for reconciliation?
Well, people got to be patient. After World War II, the United States and United Kingdom, who won that war, controlled the education systems of the losers of Germany and Japan for 30 years. Education takes time. Right now, decisions are being made over who's going to control the Gaza Strip's civil affairs and military affairs. If you have the same United Nations people that encourage schools to teach hate and becoming martyrs, then things aren't going to get better for the people of Gaza. But if you implement the Abraham Accords curriculum that's been implemented in the United Arab Emirates and Morocco, teaching tolerance and not hate, then little by little progress can be made toward one day normalization. Let's not go very far as you are with the word peace. I define peace as Israelis and Palestinians eating hummus together in public squares. Normalcy is Israelis and Palestinians eating hummus separately, without either side having what to fear. That's possible sooner or later.
I love that vision. That's something only an educator or a journalist or a writer could really bring into, or a filmmaker actually could bring into view for people. So thank you for bringing it that way. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us?
That people should help if they try, if they can, to Honest Reporting. Very small organization. We're getting bigger little by little, but we still have an editorial team of only 4. And imagine what we could do if we had more. So please share our content on social media, whatever platform you're on, Instagram, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn. Play along with our articles, share them because it helps the algorithm. Subscribe at honestreporting.com/subscribe. And if you can, even a little bit helps, go to honestreporting.com/donate. We need all the help that we can get in fighting this fight on the media battlefield. That's the key to success. On the military battlefield, and also making things easier for Jews and other pro-Israel supporters in America and around the world, except maybe New York.
Thank you so much for going through so many topics with us.
My pleasure, Shanna. Thanks for having such a great show.